offset eye, Mahomes under center. First and goal. Snap, spin, fake, handoff. Here comes the rush. He throws a pass end zone. It's caught. Kelsey in the back of the end zone. Caught it again. Number 4. Travis Kelsey has caught 4 touchdown passes tonight. And that one puts the Chiefs up 30-23 with 7:25 to go. And Kelsey, the first receiver to ever have 4 touchdown receptions on Monday Night Football.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
That is our savior and patron saint of fantasy points, Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelsey, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times.
Oh,
it is noon on a Tuesday and on Peacock, but it is 5 o'clock somewhere. He's Connor Rogers. She's Julie Stewart-Binks. I am Matthew Berry. Welcome to the Happy Hour. Julie, oh my God.
That was a perfect game for a Monday Night Miracle or a nightmare. It depends on what side of the ball you were on.
Mostly miracles.
Miracles.
Mostly miracles.
Good vibes here.
Unbelievable. Like, you put it out into the universe. I do it every week. I've been doing it for years upon years upon years. Hashtag Monday Night Miracle. A lot of people needed big games from Kelsey or Mahomes or Devontae Adams or Josh Jacobs or Daniel Carlson, and it doesn't matter who you needed. You got it all.
Everything hit, man.
Look at this.
Just a glutton of excitement out there for everyone. Holy smokes. I mean, Kelsey, we saw, had 4 touchdowns yesterday. I said I didn't want him to have more than 30 points, at least in my fantasy league. Yikes, McGee for me. He had 33.5 points, but we saw Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey. I mean, they just keep it going. But on the other side of the ball, too, the Raiders being able to put up so many points. And with them being up 17-0, I was like, all right. Well, I guess I can go to bed after this right now. No, obviously not, especially when you're at Arrowhead against the Kansas City Chiefs, who are now 4-1 at this point. And when we look at this game, we look at, Matthew, you mentioned you ask people for what they need ahead of the game. But then last night you asked what were people's best comebacks in this game.
Yes, I did, because that was every once in a while, every season we get a couple of Monday Night Miracles. And so you sit here and you look at Allen, who says down by 116 going into the game with Carr, Devontae, Jacobs, Kelsey, and Daniel Carlson left. He came back and won by a point, as you saw there. Guy Malik was down 90, had Kelsey, Adams, and Jacobs not pictured, came back to win by 1.08. John Orand, our friend John Orand from Sports Business Journal, he had Kelsey. I had Waller.
Sorry, John.
That's too bad.
Sorry about that. I hope Andrew Marchand gives you hell about it on your sports media podcast this week. Shout out to those guys. And this is Pete. This is Pete from our show league.
Yes, our producer right now.
Our producer Pete right now tweeted out yesterday. My fellow producer, let's call him Stephen D. That's Stephen D'Agostino. Wanted to show the score of our matchup on our fantasy football show. He wanted to do that, right? Not realizing that he still had Mahomes and Kelsey and down 60 points. What happened? The Killer Koalas, 149 to the Jeans House Gang, 146. That's what Stephen D'Agostino gets for talking trash.
He dropped
nice
the goal
job,
before the goal.
Pete D.
Ball before the goal
Who is
line.
this person?
And then,
oh no.
Go ahead, Julie. Why don't you read your own tweet?
Hi, Matthew Berry. Need Travis Kelsey not to have 30 points to set off the fact that I benched Gabe Davis.
So that's what you needed to have happen. What did happen, Julie Stewart-Binks?
Travis Kelsey had over 30 points and had a career night, of course, because that is the Binks jinx. And I lost my league by like 0.60 points. So, I mean, whatever. I was going to lose it anyways because of Gabe Davis. Anyone who benched Gabe Davis this past weekend, T's and P's.
No. Listen. I like the Jinx Binks or the Binks Jinx or whatever it is. Hopefully you haven't brought it to this show. But what I would say here is I was talking to you backstage and I said, I don't think you should beat yourself up for benching Gabe Davis. Now,
of course not. I don't.
Right. Good. No. Look, now, did we talk him up last week and saying I'm in on him? Was he on the love list?
Every week.
Right.
Since August.
Since August.
But I was
One week I was finally right.
Okay, so I took notes on the show because I'm a nerd on all that, and you were very high on Gabe Davis for this week. But ahead of that, he had been really very pedestrian. And so at what point do you pull the plug and you say, no more. I can't do this anymore.
Okay,
Wrong week.
Right, but then you put it out into the universe that I just need Kelsey not to do that, and of course Kelsey does.
Keep going.
Hang on for 1 second, though. Yeah. Hang on for 1 second. She's just like, because I'm a nerd. kind of want to ask you this, right?
Do you take notes on
no,
the
no,
shows?
No. Hang on. I got this, JSP. Let me ask you something. She says she's a nerd. Women say this all the time. She's like, "Oh, I'm a nerd," and you know what that meant? Like in high school, like you wore glasses. No, you weren't a nerd. Like I was a nerd. Like you have long blonde hair. You're tall and thin.
This is the
like
hot
I am.
girl disguise.
We're not getting fooled.
Like right. Like I mean, like every girl that says she was a nerd had like 12 dates to the prom, right? You know,
Not
like
me over here.
Where you were like, unless you were like in a basement crunching fantasy numbers, like I was by hand. Like then if you want to nerd out, I will nerd out with you. You are not a nerd.
Right,
you are absolutely not a nerd.
Wrote down. Don't start Gabe Davis.
All right,
Nerd
let's.
alert.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll
it's like
nerd out
all
here
those
on the
80s
show.
teen. It's like all those teen movies. Like, oh, she's the nerdy girl, and then she takes off her glasses.
Yes.
And like
Everybody
she's a
gasps.
smoke show,
Yes.
right?
No,
Exactly.
we won't go through the history, but I don't need to prove it because I was definitely a nerd in high school, and so that's why it's transferred here to be able to take notes on the show and know that
I like
should
that you do this
have,
to take notes.
You know,
It is
Dave Gettleman.
It is the Dave
monkey
Gettleman.
too.
That's a good call, Connor.
But
That's
I
right.
did learn that I should
Right,
have.
but she
we should
wasn't
have
a nerd,
played.
right?
Dave.
Rogers, you're with me. She's not no. It's just all right. Thanks.
Okay.
There we
All
go.
right. I was
All right,
cool
fair
in high
enough.
school. I
Yeah,
guess
there you
we
go.
have figured this out on the show.
100%.
But other guys that were cool in Monday Night Football, Josh Jacobs, that was someone that you were not very hot on to start the season.
Oh, God.
His
Right back at you, Barry.
receipts.
And you know
I
what?
kept those receipts on there too.
By the way, fair. Asked and answered. 100% was not in Revenge of the Nerds. Right here is what's happening. What was the guy's name? What was the Ogre? What was the on Revenge of the Nerds?
Okay,
Ted McGinley.
thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyway, look, 100% was out on Josh Jacobs. Didn't think he would get the passing game usage. Didn't think he would get the total usage. Right? I thought McDaniels would use much more Kinney. We would see that Amir Abdullah and Zamir White would be involved, and that is not the case. 21 carries. He also gets the 5 receptions last night. Just a monster game in week 5. He's the 3rd best running back in fantasy, over 30 fantasy points so far this year. He's the 4th best running back in fantasy. 51% of the Raiders' total offense last night came from Josh Jacobs. Averaged over 10 yards per carry. Consecutive games now with over 30 fantasy points. He's a locked-in RB1. I was 100% wrong on Josh Jacobs. Asked and answered. I've been right on Josh Jacobs. I've hated Josh Jacobs a lot in my career, and I've been right most of the time. This year, dead wrong.
I mean, it was understandable. Number one, my simple rule is if you're playing deep into the Hall of Fame game, you are not fantasy relevant.
Right.
That's rule number one.
what
Rule
I
number
was
2,
thinking.
they didn't even pick up his 5th-year options. Let's not act like the Raiders expected this from Josh Jacobs right now. I think it took a red alert for them, an awful start to the season, to get back to McDaniels' New England roots and say, we need to run the football. We don't stand a chance dropping our quarterback behind this offensive line over and over again. Now they're leaning on Josh Jacobs, and good things are happening.
That is a great point, and that is part of my preseason analysis was that. I mean, like if you go back and look, I'm going to cop to it. Like he was on my preseason hate list. But part of the analysis, if you go there, was 2 things. Was that number one is that not only did I not like him, the Raiders didn't like him. Like they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, which to do that for a first-round draft pick, a guy they drafted in the first round, is is saying something, right? And right, to your point, he played the first 2 series of the Hall of Fame game where all their other important starters like Carr and Adams and Waller were out. But he's locked in moving forward here. But that was the only running back that was solid last night.
Right, because on the other side of the ball, Clyde Edwards-Helaire did not have a great night, of course. He rushed the ball 9 times for 15 yards, caught 3 passes for 20 yards. Looked pretty pedestrian, but we also know there was very much Mahomes-Kelsey show at play. But is this what we expect of Clyde Edwards-Helaire going forward?
I think so. I think it's a matter of fact that Kelsey dominates the red zone targets, which is a huge problem for anybody not named Kelsey. Or if you have Mahomes, it's a good thing because it's working. And if you listen to Barry for the last 2 weeks when we've come off huge Clyde Edwards-Helaire performances, he said, if you can sell high, do it, because there's just going to be a lot of highs and lows of this. So I agree with that. I think with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because this offense is great and because he is the guy in the backfield, there's going to be plenty of really, really good weeks. But you're going to have to deal with this because of how touchdown dominant Kelce is, and the fact that they are never going to be a team that turns around and leans on a running back no matter the game script.
Yeah, I mean, like we felt the production was somewhat fluky because just the touchdowns didn't match the opportunity there. He was getting used in the passing game. This is a weird game in that the Chiefs got down 17. They're not usually down 17,
No.
and so I think that's one of the reasons why Jerick McKinnon, who they like more in the passing game than CEH, saw more snaps. What's weird is he saw 6 of the 8 goal line snaps. I mean, so that was weird. I think
that's a red flag.
If there is an overarching theme to the Chiefs, it's that when Patrick Mahomes talks, we probably should have listened, right? I mean, like, because when he talked in the preseason about, like, 1 week it's going to be this guy, 1 week it's going to be another. And so for as great as an offense as Kansas City is, and for all the wizardry of Andy Reid, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Travis Kelce, it's Patrick Mahomes, and the rest week to week is sort of
Just,
like
a sprinkling of whoever is wherever.
Right.
Sidekicks.
Sidekicks, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bit
Fringe
characters,
guys. Bit characters. Wacky next door neighbors, right? I mean, well, you're hoping they come in and they pop for a scene, but not always going to be their thing. Here's what's weird. Is yet still, despite a dud game, in a game in which everyone got off, he was still a dud, 6.5 fantasy points. He's running back 46 for week number 5. And yet still, he's still a top 10 fantasy running back. And given just the dearth of good running backs, look, he's not running back 8. But he is still probably a borderline top 20 running back. I don't want to overreact to one game, just like I didn't want to overreact to the good games that have happened previously.
Right.
I will say this. I mean, he got 12 touches, and 12 touches in this offense is usually, borderline top 20 flex worthy. He only got 9 rushes in this game. Nice call by you, JSB. That was your prop bet going into last night.
One of them. We'll discuss that
right?
later on.
Yeah, you took the under on 12.5 rushes for him. He only gets 9 in this one. First time this year he's had single-digit fantasy points, Connor. So again, he's not the RB1 that we thought he was that he was looking like the previous couple weeks, which we always said, like, he's 2 touchdowns on 7 rushes where he gets 0 yards. Like, we knew that production was fluky, but I also think this lack of production is a little bit fluky as well. He's somewhere in the middle, which is, he's running back 18 to 24. Is what he is.
Right. And when you look at this game that happened on Monday night, this is likely not going to happen every single time. Having a Travis Kelce 4 touchdown night that is going to explode the record books. I mean, who knows? It could happen. I just maybe jinxed that whole thing. But if you look at, we talk about bit characters, fringe guys, the Chiefs wide receivers have been confusing in terms of really who is going to be the guy. We have Marcus Valdes-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster. Hyphenated names, by the way, which I'm a big fan of. And also, Mecole Hardman. Those 3 guys haven't had a touchdown. Connor, I mean, how do you feel about who is really the guy in terms of wide receivers?
Well, there's none that are touchdown factors at all. That's the most important thing. If you're in a PPR league, you can rely, I think, on MVS because of the target share that he gets. 7+ targets in 3 of his past 4 games. But when you look at Juju, Juju is not explosive enough in my eyes to warrant, big expectations because he's also not used in the red zone. It's a Kelce offense in the red zone. We cannot say it enough. Yes, they do some quirky things down there as well. We know Mahomes can move a lot, but they are not dropping back and going first read or second read to their wide receivers. There are a lot of tight formations, a lot of heavy sets as well. So once again, you can rely on MVS a little bit, and he's available somehow in 63% of Yahoo leagues right now in PPR. But Juju, all the evidence is there right now. I mean, when you look at the fantasy finishes, his best finish has been wide receiver 35. He's been as low as wide receiver 82. That's a very, very scary variance.
Under 14 fantasy points in every game so far this year, Connor. He's got no touchdowns so far, no touchdown receptions through 5 games as well. My friend Graham Barfield tweeted out, Juju Duster weekly finishes this week. I mean, to your point, like, right, wide receiver 37, wide receiver 82, 35, 38, 66. Wide receiver 35 in week 3 was his best finish, to your point, Connor, as well. And then you think about this upcoming schedule for the Chiefs, right? The Bills, the Niners, a bye, and then Tennessee. It's not till Tennessee where you feel like, okay, that's, again, it's the Chiefs. So they're going to move the ball on anyone, but we're doing our waiver wire segment coming up later in the show, and Juju Smith-Schuster, I think if you need a spot, I don't mind dropping him. There's going to be 3 or 4 games this year where Juju goes off. It's coming, right? You have to just mentally prepare yourself like, oh, I had that guy and I waived him, and then now, of course, he goes off. And who knows, maybe it's next week against the Bills. But I think you have to live with that because 5 weeks of wide receiver 35 or worse just isn't getting it done. Like we have a sample size now. 5 weeks is a small sample size, but in a league in which you usually only get 14 weeks to make the playoffs, like that's enough. Like you're not starting him, and I think there's other guys out there that you feel like you could get more consistent fantasy value from than Juju Smith-Schuster, unfortunately.
And I think Juju is always or still living off that reputation of the Steelers when he was just a target monster, and he's gone to Kansas City, and he's just because Tyreek Hill's gone doesn't mean that he stepped into that role. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's a little bit more name your reputation at this point for Juju, unfortunately.
Well, and being a part of the Chiefs' offense. But again, Mahomes said, it's not just going to be, last year it was Kelsey and Tyreek. This year it's going to be a different, every week it's going to be a different guy. And what do you know? Patrick Mahomes was telling the truth. And so great for the Chiefs and a nightmare for defensive coordinators that face Kansas City and fantasy managers.
All right, so we know that on the other side of the ball, Darren Waller went out in last night's game.
The opposite of a Monday Night Miracle. Like John Oran, right? Exactly.
Yes.
Like, right? He had Kelsey, I had Waller. What are you going to do? This was brutal. This was tough. He left the game early with a hamstring injury. It's been a tough year, Connor. 50 yards receiving or less in 3 out of 5 games this year. He played just 8 snaps against the Chiefs. They're on a bye next week. I don't know that there's any takeaway from Darren Waller except you're going to need a tight end replacement for at least next week because he's on a bye. And then hopefully in the next 2 weeks we'll get some news. Hopefully he comes back healthy. We'll see. But I would be, if I'm going, you're already looking for a tight end replacement for Waller this week. Ideally, you might want to look for somebody that doesn't have just 1 week value because this could linger.
Yes.
We've seen it before with Waller.
Yeah, it might be beyond the streaming scope. And I think with Waller, the one trend we do have is lack of health. And I think in August when he was sitting out all those days, a lot of people were saying they're getting the contract done. But now it looks like there was some reality to him being banged up that's carried over and carried on throughout the season where he simply cannot be relied on week to week.
Right. Well, we'll discuss him and Devontae Adams a little bit more in the show. But let's get to our main events, the meats of the program, waiver wired, and we begin with the running backs. And as Matthew mentioned, we've seen 5 weeks. We have a bunch of guys that are off for a bye week this week. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift, Damian Pierce, Jamal Williams, which is, this is when we start to see, of course, we want to know what teams are looking like what they should be. So we look at Kenneth Walker, and he is available in 55%
He's the guy.
of Yahoo leagues. And we've been talking him up a lot. We know that Rashad Penny is out for the season with a broken fibula, unfortunately. But this means that Kenny Walker's now the lead back in Seattle. And we know that Seattle likes to put up a lot of points. So, Matthew, this is a guy, if you're looking for a running back, go Kenny Walker.
1,000%. All in on Kenneth Walker. He's available in 55% of Yahoo leagues. He's available around that number in other on other platforms as well. And honestly, there's going to be a lot of hype around Kenneth Walker this week. But if he's rostered in your league, I would make a trade. I think he has the potential to be a league winner here. You mentioned Seattle and how much they like to run the ball. 21 running back touches per game. That's what the Seahawks are averaging here. And so Kenneth Walker, who played 83% of the snaps after Rashad Penny went down, we've seen, to your point, they are a very competent offense under Geno Smith. They move the ball. They're playing at a faster pace of play as well. And I've discussed this. I mean, Michael Smith went, wait, whoa, when we talked about him a couple of weeks ago. I have heard a source that I trust told me that the Seattle coaching staff thinks he's got LaDainian Tomlinson-like potential.
Whoa.
Like just that kind of big playability, that kind of versatility. Like, I mean, that's insane to think about, one of the greatest running backs to ever play the game. But I don't want to put that on him because 99.9% of the running backs that come to the league aren't going to be LaDainian Tomlinson, and you can still be a very successful player in this league. I'm just saying that just to point out, this isn't like now we got to go to the backup and we got to next guy up and we got to coach him up. They're very excited to get Kenneth Walker into the lineup. They believe in him in a big way. This is somebody they spent a lot of draft capital on, Connor, and I know from scouting the players, all the work that you do for Bleacher Report, this is somebody that the NFL scouting community was very high on coming out of college.
Very high on him. He was my RB2 only behind Breece Hall, and we've seen what Breece Hall has done recently. And on top of that, they made significant investments in their offensive line in the draft as well that are paying off, where you can trust their run game. And if he didn't have the sports hernia in August, he would have been eating into Rashad Penny's snap count as it is. That's how much they loved him. They wanted to get him on the field right away. So now the fact that he's automatically inserted into a true RB1 workhorse role in a team that has a pretty good run-blocking offensive line, a team that wants to run the ball, a team that relies on their offense a lot because their defense really can't stop anybody, Kenneth Walker is in for a big couple of months here.
And you like, listen.
Empty the fab.
Yeah,
would you? I was just going to ask you guys, if you have a fab system.
Empty it.
Find more if you can under the couch.
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Use the number one waiver
I
wire.
like to take notes
Being
on this
very
show,
aggressive.
so I'm going to write that one down.
I would be very aggressive in trying to acquire Kenneth Walker, whether it's a free agent or if he is already rostered in your league. He's rostered in a lot of the leagues that I'm in. Someone I have on a number of teams, but in other leagues, I'd be aggressive in trying to trade for him as well.
Okay, all right. Well, we know in Denver, Javonte Williams is injured, so Mike Boone is someone that you might be looking to acquire potentially if he is not. It's 64% available in Yahoo leagues, as well as Latavius Murray, bit of a journeyman who has now joined the Broncos after being with the Saints and having a very interesting story of how he was in London and then now with Denver. But if you're looking at the Broncos running back situation, we know Melvin Gordon is number one. Mike Boone, worth it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they're both going to have roles. Obviously, Murray didn't play last week against the Colts because it was a short week and he had just come over from the Saints. But, they play the Chargers this week, and no team in the NFL allows more yards per carry to opposing running backs than the Los Angeles Chargers. I mean, they gave over 200 rushing yards to the Browns last week. And so expect it, especially given how much Russell Wilson is struggling. And as predicted, apparently he's hurt. Whatever. The fact of the matter is they're going to lean on the run game. I think this is going to be a three-headed committee. Gordon's already rostered, but Boone is going to be the third down back, get some passing down work. And I do think Latavius Murray is interesting. I think, look, Gordon was fine last week, but down the stretch against the Colts when they were trying to make that comeback, it was Boone on the field, not Gordon. Gordon, last week was the first week that Melvin Gordon did not fumble. He's still on a very short leash, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Murray significantly cuts into Gordon's role. They're both sort of similar running backs as opposed to Boone as more of a smaller guy. And so I think it sort of depends on what you need. If you need a flex play for this week, Boone's the guy. If you sort of want to swing for the fences a little bit more, I think Murray is a guy that's interesting to roster because you're not starting him this week, but I could see him overtaking Melvin Gordon's role at some point this season.
Yeah, I like Boone's short-term flex PPR value here because, piggybacking off what Barry said, the Chargers, the Jets who just gave up a big day to Raheem Mostert, and then Jacksonville, we saw what Dameon Pierce was able to do. Those are three teams coming up that you can get your run game or pass-catching backs working against. Where I go a little bit glass half empty here is when Latavius Murray goes somewhere, he seems to get involved. Melvin Gordon's in front of him. The Broncos just have not been very good. But you do like that Boone seems to be a factor in some kind of third down role.
Right. Well, when we look now at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, running back Rachaad White is available. He would be behind Leonard Fournette, of course, but maybe when you get into garbage time against Pittsburgh this week, he might be someone that could get some.
They're starting to use
options.
him a little bit more. He's had 8 touches each of the last 2 weeks. He played 40% of the snaps in week number 5. Leonard Fournette's snap count has decreased in 2 straight weeks. They really like Rachaad White. They obviously, to your point, Julie, yes, Uncle Lenny, he is the starter, but he's one of the most important insurance backs. If anything were to happen to Fournette, White would be a top 10 running back any week that Fournette is out. And yet still, he's starting to get more and more usage where he might be flex worthy in a deeper league. And so I think he's a good guy to have on your roster, just given the lack of depth behind Fournette on a team that, wants to be balanced on offense.
An ideal stash right now, available in 66% of leagues. That's kind of a high number. So if you can stash him, great. Because I think what the Bucs are going to run into eventually is they continue to win more and more games. There are going to be weeks where Fournette maybe doesn't practice or Fournette's not feeling his best. They'll be in position, honestly, look at how bad that division is, that they just won't play him. They'll be like, okay, you know what, we're going to give you this week off because we need you for January. We don't maybe need you at the end of November right now. And that's where Rachaad White might really come in handy down the stretch when he gets to step into that role for a week here, a week there,
Right.
while also developing that pass-catching niche role right now.
Yeah, that could be a very stealth pickup to have him stashed away. And we look at the Cardinals, not necessarily maybe a team that you would say, hey, I want to go pick up a whole bunch of guys from there. But if they've got injuries like James Conner and Darrell Williams, they both left the game on Sunday. Eno Benjamin is available in 89% of Yahoo leagues, and they are against Seattle, who, as we know, they allow points. And so if you're looking at someone like Benjamin, how excited would you be to be able to add him to your team?
I mean, listen, it's a short-term ad, obviously. We don't know the status of Darrell Williams or James Conner. I think that if Conner were to miss, it would be a committee with him and Darrell Williams. If both guys are out, obviously, Benjamin gets the nice start against the Seahawks. 45 yards from scrimmage, 4 more targets in 4 out of 5 games this year. So they are using him somewhat, right? It is an offense that can move the ball. 11 touches, 53 yards, and a touchdown filling in for James Conner last week. So we don't, as of this broadcast, we don't have a status update on Conner, whether he's going to miss this week or if it's a longer-term injury. But injuries are something that Conner has dealt with throughout his career. So I do think Benjamin makes a lot of sense for anyone that rosters Conner, and certainly you like him this week.
A good streaming option this week.
Good streaming option this week.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle can't stop a nosebleed right now, and they see Seattle 2 of the next 4 games. So when it comes down to it, he might be able to have an impact, but it just fully depends on the injuries that we're not aware of yet. Benjamin is going to be their guy if both those guys can't go, but this Arizona offense just has a lot of different concerns right now.
Definitely. Okay, so for the 49ers, we know that Jeff Wilson Jr. is their number 1 running back, but Tevin Coleman, that you guys are saying is a ghost of Coleman coming back.
Yeah.
Vultures in 2
season.
touchdowns for San Francisco. Is this a guy that is more than a streamer or someone that you would stash away?
Yes, no, sort of. I don't think he's more than a streamer, right? I can't. Look, I get it. It was a big game. They were blowing him out here. I don't necessarily think he has. He played 28% of the snaps in a game in which they blew the Panthers out, right? So under 30% of the snaps, he gets the 2 touchdowns, but like 8 for 23 as a rusher, 3 for 44 is nice as a receiver, but again, I mean, you're talking 11 touches. To me, Tevin Coleman is interesting just because, as we talked about on yesterday's show, we're like, okay, when Elijah Mitchell went down, we're like, okay, Jeff Wilson Jr. is the next man up. But Jeff Wilson Jr. has missed 12 games over the past 2 seasons. He's injury-prone himself. So is it Jordan Mason? Is it TDP? Like, who's going to step up and sort of be the insurance running back for Jeff Wilson Jr.? And I think we found out, turns out it's Tevin Coleman. So I feel like I'm not rushing out to put Tevin Coleman in my lineup. We've seen this before from Tevin Coleman. Not totally buying it. They're home to the Falcons. And the Falcons, by the way, have played kind of plucky defense. Mm-hmm. Like, they're not great, but they're not as much of a pushover as you might think. Yeah. Like they're sort of decent. And then you get into Kansas City, and the Rams are the next 2 after that. And so those are tougher defenses. I mean, I know Kansas City just got rolled by Josh Jacobs, but hard for me to see Tevin Coleman having games where you feel good about starting him, at least until we get more of a sample size. But don't mind picking him up, again, because if he got the lead role and Wilson's injury-prone.
If Wilson was injured, yeah.
Right. So I think he's more of an injury,
Yeah, if you have the space, you could hold on to him right now. Jeff Wilson has had a lower body injury each of the last 3 years. So unfortunately, he is a guy that, as the games indicate, missed 12 games over the past 2 seasons. He gets hurt, and his workload has been significant these last couple weeks. So you have to wonder if they also want to take some of that workload off him in the next coming weeks. And one thing with Kyle Shanahan and really that coaching tree as a whole, they always lean back to old friends in dire times. Tevin Coleman is an old friend for Kyle Shanahan. Instead of going to the rookies, for whatever reason, they draft a running back in the 3rd round every year, and they don't use him. And I know Ty Davis Price is hurt, but that's where Tevin Coleman could quietly have some value, but I just don't think there's the volume at the moment.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some of the stash candidates out there. Just some other guys that maybe if you're super desperate, you might like them.
Yeah, I mean, these are more guys. These are guys that you're not necessarily starting, but just, if you're doing pretty well, you don't have any needs, you're late in your waiver pecking order, but you just want to stash a guy because you never know. These are guys that Kenneth Walker was on this list 2 weeks ago, and now he's going to be the hottest pickup in the world. So you see sort of the guys there. Gus Edwards is interesting, coming off the physically unable to perform list. That's a name that sort of jumps out to me. Jaylen Warren, given the struggles of Najee Harris. You know, our expectation is that Jonathan Taylor is back for the Colts here, but Deion Johnson ran well against the Broncos last week when Hines went out with a concussion and Taylor wasn't playing. So those are all interesting names there. James
keep
Cook,
on your radar.
Keep on your radar as well. So, and you see Pacheco and James Cook there at the top of that list as well.
And whenever there's a Buffalo Bill on there too, you are very curious to see.
That's the one, long term.
Yeah.
Yeah, James Cook for sure. But that's more.
They want to get their running game going.
Yeah, if that's more, once again, an injury to a guy like Motor, or if your league does allow waiver keepers on the back end of your draft, Cook's going to be a big-time player in 2023. It's going to take an injury for him to be that this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in 2 dynasty leagues. I'm bullish on Cook's long-term
He's got
potential.
a big future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly does.
So we just talked about a whole bunch of guys that we would potentially add, stash, stream. Who would you drop?
Well, Darrell Henderson, jumps out to me, right? Rostered in 73% of leagues. He's running back 44 on the year, right? He had 0 rushing attempts last week. He's had 14 total touches over the last 3 weeks. And so you're like, oh, this is Cam Akers' backfield. Not really.
No,
like none of them
nobody's
really
backfield.
He's not doing anything
They can't
either.
block anyone. They're not in scoring position. So I mean, Darrell Henderson, who had kind of a flash at the beginning of the year, and he was good last season. It's just this Rams offense. It sort of depends on what you need, but like it just does. The confidence level I have in the Rams getting their running game going anytime soon. I don't know.
The Rams don't have a field stretcher, and that is starting to cost the backfield, where neither guy has value. So if you're expecting Henderson to figure it out or the workload to go up, I'm just not that optimistic for the next month here.
Yes, that's certainly for sure with this team. But there's a team that we are a little bit optimistic about, especially after they blew out the Lions, and that's the New England Patriots. Maybe they've found a wide receiver that they can trust in the future. We're going to be talking more about our waiver wired wide receivers when we return on Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, Connor Rogers. I'm JSB. Stay tuned.
I'm rolling with Hunter Renfrow over 4.5 receptions.
I'm going with Clyde Edwards-Helaire under 12.5 rushing attempts.
You know where you make money is on the boring stuff, the unsexy stuff. There's nothing fun about betting a kicker prop except winning money. I like Daniel Carlson over 1.5 field goals. Nothing boring about winning money, winning that BetMGM money. There you go. That's my goal. Do you think if we get good enough, and by we, I really mean me and JSB, not you necessarily.
Sorry.
But like,
I didn't see a green check mark by yours.
No.
I saw this.
So
but
close.
like, if JSB and I get good enough, do you think we could bankrupt BetMGM?
Maybe. Especially with those
I think we
$1,000 free
could.
bets that you're delivering
$1,000
DoorDashing.
free bet.
I
And
did.
your
I put
DoorDash.
in my
Promo code Barry.
Yeah, I put in my Barry code yesterday
Yeah,
for when I
nice.
signed up. Yes.
There you go.
And I also
One on
have
the board.
to. Yes, I got that one right there with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I will have to say hand up. I did not have Derek Carr plus 5,000 for first touchdown score. So,
That's all right.
Yeah, I got honesty
First
here on
touchdown
the
score.
show.
Yeah, first touchdown
I
score.
love first down touchdown
Yeah.
scores for that kind of money. They usually never pay off. That's why they're at plus.
That's
5,000.
why they're plus 5,000.
But
That's
with
how that works.
Hunter Renfrow, you were very close though on that one.
Oh, it was nice that they let me stay in it until the literal last play they ran,
know.
where he ran into
Bad beat.
Devontae Adams.
Maybe
That the ball was definitely
Devontae
going
Adams
his
might
way.
have known what was going on.
Yeah,
there
no,
at
it was
the
great.
line.
Lovely. Had a great time.
When Wallen went out, I thought,
I was like,
this
it's
is done. You got
Done.
it.
Yeah.
You got it. And then they're moving the ball, and then,
Yeah. And then Renfrow played, I think, 26, basically half their snaps.
Yeah.
So,
What are you going to do?
you win some, you lose some.
You do.
Yeah, okay,
I mean,
so-
in
You
this
lose
case,
a lot.
we win some.
Yes,
and
I
you
lose all of
and
them.
you lose. There
Yes.
you go. It just-
Yes,
I want
my,
you
my
guys to look
$5
good.
won,
Yeah, I
you know,
appreciate
I'm a
that.
team player.
25.
I'm
Okay,
like the
so
offensive line of the show.
There you go.
No credit in the box score,
No.
but all the credit on the field.
100%.
doing all the
Yep.
work.
Yeah.
But when you look at this, when you look at Hunter Renfrow, and now they're on a bye, we're not sure about the status of Darren Waller and also Devontae Adams.
Well, we
Well,
should
with
mention
the-
that.
Yeah, let's discuss this.
Right. So we mentioned Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Cooks, Hunter Renfrow are all on a bye this week, so chances are you're looking for a pass catcher. Worth noting that on his way out of the game, Devontae Adams shoved, it would appear to be a cameraman. And so a fan took a video of it. It's gone viral. And so news reporting out this morning that the league is looking into it. We see the video right here. Just shoves the guy. There's actually been a police report filed as well. That news is just in here. But regardless,
Devontae apologized on Twitter. I don't know how that works in the police report.
Yeah, I mean, I assume the guy would have to press charges, whatever. What am I, a lawyer? Like, I'm barely a fantasy analyst. But the fact is, what I think is important here is that there is a chance that he gets suspended. Because the NFL does not want its players shoving people, walking off the field shoving people that are there to do his job. Like that guy is there to do a job, which is he's been hired by somebody and he has clearance, obviously, I assume, to be on the field and to take, videos or photos and, in a moment of anger for Adams after a very tough loss, and he shoves him out of the way. And so, pretty hard shove as you saw. And so the point is that there is a chance that you're definitely going to be without Devontae Adams this week. There's a chance there may be another week or two coming down the pike if you have Adams on your roster. Just something to be aware of, and we'll follow that news closely to see if he does get it suspended.
Harder shove than the roughing the passer penalty last night.
It was more just like
by far.
It depends how much force you get. Like, if that guy was a bigger guy, that wouldn't maybe have happened.
Are you body shaming the cameraman right
I'm just
now?
saying.
To get your weight up to the cameraman?
Exactly.
Good
Come
Lord.
on, dude. Like,
You bounce off a ball.
Get a good
Get a lift in.
center
Give
of
him a
balance.
protein shake.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Like,
You need a brace
it's the
for
weight
it.
room, cameraman.
Yeah.
Just be out.
It could have prevented it.
Right, exactly. We
himself.
like our cameramen on our. I just want Julie, God bless cameramen.
I love when you get like Julie. I'm like,
what are you doing?
What's he got?
I just want all the cameramen, the people that have to are using equipment to make me look presentable to a national television audience, which is no easy feat, Connor Rogers.
A lot of work.
And so I just want you to
Takes an
know
army.
that the actions and words of Julie Stewart-Binks do not
Hey,
reflect.
I'm also a
do
camera
not
operator.
reflect the words and feelings or the opinions
I'm just
of
saying,
the Fantasy Football Happy Hour,
maybe
myself,
Devontae
NBC,
Adams
or
didn't
Peacock.
necessarily know what he was pushing. Like, sometimes like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize that door was open already. And you kind of like stumble through.
Good
lawyering.
You should not be a lawyer. You should not be a lawyer.
He didn't know what he was pushing.
Check.
This
Okay,
is
back to the waiver
bad
wire.
lawyering.
Two people that are not
All right,
lawyers apparently on Fantasy Football Happy Hour.
Devontae Adams just got found guilty based on that.
Yes.
Okay, just so
He's
we're
out for
clear.
the season
I
now,
was a
thanks to
camera
Julie.
operator at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, and I had to run out, also the reporter, but run out onto the fields, like by baseball players who were not going to push me. But like, there were times where I almost had a lot of collisions. So I also,
I know, and yet here you are, you're body shaming this poor guy. Just because he's not,
let's not have that be the headline
he can't take a
of
hit
this
the way
show.
you can, apparently.
Maybe you should play some hockey. Okay,
We are off
waiver
the highway.
wire. We are off the highway. Let's get back on Hunter Renfrow. We were wondering about him in this. We're going to move on from that right now, but we're not necessarily sure what's going to happen with the Raiders in terms of those different things. But we know the Patriots, Jakobi Meyers, he's been leading the Patriots' air attack across the board, team high in receptions. This is a guy that you feel confident about going forward.
It's surprising. We talked about him yesterday on the show as well after his big game, and I think, now that week 5 is done, Jakobi Meyers, on a points per game basis, is the 8th best wide receiver in fantasy.
It's insane.
Which is kind of crazy. He's averaging over 17 fantasy points per game. He's available in 52% of Yahoo leagues. Browns, Bears, Jets, Colts are the next 4 for the Patriots. And so whether it is Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi under center, looks like it's probably going to be Bailey Zappi next week. Doesn't feel like Mac Jones is that close to returning. But either way, as you see it here on your screen, he's getting a lot of targets, 6, 13, 8 in the 3 games he's played so far this year. He got into the end zone last week, which is something that he, for the longest time, wasn't able to do. He's 3rd in yards per route run over the last 3 weeks. Played a season high offensive, 95% of, played a season high in offensive snaps in week 5, I should say. Over 60 yards in 3 straight games. It's still a run-first offense, but Meyers is such a floor play. Wide receiver 8's a little surprising. I don't think he's that. But do I think he should be available in 55% or 52%, whatever it is, of Yahoo leagues? No. He needs to be rostered in all of them.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing how we were staying away from New England's offense, and now we're all over them. I mean,
I wouldn't say all over them. One guy. The running backs and one guy.
Yes,
toes in the water.
Ramondre Stevenson and one guy. Okay, so
toes
another
in the water
guy.
is a good way to put it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you have
socks off. That's it.
Yeah.
Do you have your toe in the water for
Butt in the sand.
Alec Pierce?
There we go.
Maybe.
Alec Pierce.
For Indianapolis.
You know what? I do. I'll even go ankles in the water for this one. Alec Pierce, listen, somebody in Indianapolis has to help out Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan needs to help out himself. But they drafted Alec Pierce in the second round with expectations that he could be their wide receiver 2 this year across from Michael Pittman. It's funny to watch how he's been brought into the offense, not as this vertical jump ball threat, but more as this possession guy, which was not expected. But I think the breakout is slowly ramping up here. You've seen 60 yards in 3 straight games. He's obviously coming off a season high in targets with 8 and yards over 80. So I look at Alec Pierce, and he's somebody that I would definitely, if you need wide receiver help, especially in half point or PPR format, he's going to get his because the targets are there. I think he's looking at 7 to 10 targets a week going forward for a team that consistently keeps playing behind.
Right, he's developing rapport with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan said he's strong, he's resilient. You like to hear that from your quarterback in terms of trust going forward.
I like to hear that from a lot of people. Like,
yes.
just like I like to hear it from my cameraman.
Tough and
like,
resilient.
They're strong. Our
They're
cameramen are
strong.
strong.
Beat me up.
They're resilient.
They
They can take a hit.
They can absorb the hit.
They can absorb a hit.
Yeah.
1,000% here.
Very much the same thing.
Totally. And the other last thing I'll say on Alec Pierce is just like to the eye test. Like, kid can play.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean,
Great
you watch
athlete.
You just watch the game and you're just like,
Well,
kid can play.
that was why he was their top pick this past year. Now the Cardinals, Matthew, Rondale Moore, they're up against Seattle.
Yeah.
Again, same story as Benjamin. 82% available. Would you go for him?
I like Rondale Moore. Like, do you wish there was some deeper stuff? I mean, his average depth of target, I think, is -5 yards. I mean, something, like, jokes, but, like, seriously, like, it's all line of scrimmage stuff. It's all, like, bubble screens. But it is worth noting, Cardinals do lead the NFL in pass attempts so far this season. He's had 2 games since he's come back, 10 receptions, 13 targets there. So they're immediately putting him back into the offense. Nice matchup this week with the Seahawks, who give up the 8th most passing yards per game this season. Arizona can't stop anyone as well. So Rondale Moore, who we came into the season with high expectations for, Cliff Kingsbury talking him up in the offseason. AJ Green appears to be just basically done. We got at least 1 more week before DeAndre Hopkins comes back. But I do think that once Hopkins is back, I think that I feel bad for the human Dortch, but I do think it's going to be Hollywood Brown, it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins, and it's going to be Rondale Moore in the slot. I think. And they go 3 wide quite a bit in Arizona. They also go 4 wide quite a bit. So the snap should be there for Rondale Moore. I like him a lot. Yes, he's our 3rd pick after Meyers and Alec Pierce.
Okay, so for the Bills, and we look at if the snaps are there for a guy like Khalil Shakir. So 3 of 5 targets, 75 yards, touchdown. Crowder out, even if McKenzie is out. Can he garner any kind of relevance against Kansas City?
He absolutely can, but it just depends on if Isaiah McKenzie remains in concussion protocol. That's what this comes down to, because Khalil Shakir is a very talented player, talented rookie, and he can do a lot of different things. He can handle the slot for you. He can win over the middle of the field. Considering his size, he's got jump ball ability. I just think that the opportunity is not going to be there unless Isaiah McKenzie is hurt. So this is a wait and see one. I would have him pretty low on the priority of waiver claims at the moment.
It gets, for me, it gets pretty ugly after those 3 guys. No, Myers, Pierce, and Rondale Moore, and then you got to sort of squint. And again, if McKenzie and we know Crowder's going to be out. If McKenzie were to miss again, then maybe in what should be a shootout against the Chiefs, sure, you can sort of see it. But, again, And
then they have the bye. So what?
I mean,
so
he got 5 targets.
Streaming
you know what
option,
I mean?
but
he had the touchdown. He had the 1 big play. But, yeah, I'm with you. I feel the same way about the next guy, Connor, which is Randall Cobb.
Yeah.
13 targets in week 5, but he had 12 total targets on the season prior to that. Feels like sort of just an outlier game, right? Had a nice game against the Giants, but I feel like give me Romeo Doubs, give me Alan Lazard. Feels like he's honestly 4th or 5th in the pecking order in the Green Bay passing attack when you include the running backs.
Yep.
Even Bob Tunyon. Big Bob Tunyon has more touchdown equity than Randall Cobb. So nice story, mentioning him here just because he did get the 13 targets.
London Games was, though, a little bit of a doozy. But also the fact that, this was Aaron Rodgers' security blanket, essentially.
Yeah.
Reuniting again, not necessarily sure.
I'm just
the same.
It's a very balanced offense, and so we have yet to see Lazard and Dobbs put up consistent fantasy numbers. I certainly prefer both those guys. I think there's upside with both those guys with Dobbs and Lazard that I'm not sure is there yet with Randall Cobb. So mentioning him just to sort of say, like, if you need a warm body, he's there, and they do play the Jets this week. So, that's, he's potentially usable in a week in which it's going to be, your 4 teams are going to be out, right? But other than that, like, I just sort of feel like, I'll mention, by the way, if you need sort of a 1-week streamer, I will mention that I don't think Jahan Dotson is going to be back for this Thursday's game against the Bears. So for the Commanders, listen, he didn't play a ton of snaps, but he had some obviously big playability. Two great big touchdowns for the Commanders. I think they are going to have to throw against Chicago. So if you're desperate, I think Diami Brown could be a viable 1-week streamer this week.
Yes, he's 100% available, so that indicates a lot about him at that moment. Stash candidates, though, for wide receivers, and we look at a couple different guys here. Matthew and Connor, Jameson Williams, Sky Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson.
Well, I'll take Wan'Dale Robinson, and then, Connor, you should talk up Jameson Williams here. But on Wan'Dale Robinson, look, this team is 4-1, and Wan'Dale Robinson is somebody that we've talked about a lot in the preseason. They like him a lot. He got hurt in week 1. We haven't seen him since, but just remember, this is the guy that Brian Daboll and that Giants organization went out and drafted. Everyone else they've sort of just inherited, and so the Giants keep getting by sort of hook and by crook, and they're sort of, other than Barkley, there's not a lot to write home about. They're doing end reverses for Daniel Bellinger. I mean, it is really smoke and mirrors there in New York, But I do, Wan'Dale Robinson, who will play the slot, I do think he's an interesting guy, especially for the second half of the year. I'm high on his potential and his ability.
If Jameson Williams is available in your league, which apparently 70% of them just about, you got to go get him. You got to go get him now, because a couple things besides his talent, which we know he has game-breaking speed. They traded up very far with a division rival in Minnesota to go get Jameson Williams, so they paid that kind of price to get him. He's expected to be back 2 weeks after Detroit's bye, so he will play this year. This is a defense that cannot stop anybody. I know they had a tough week. It's an anomaly. They're not going to be shut out again like that against a New England team that was ready for them. They're banged up. Jameson Williams is going to have a huge role in this offense with Jared Goff, and it's going to start as soon as he returns.
Okay, so other potential drops, though, now.
Welcome to Dumpsville, Population U.
And this is a guy that you have been when you go on Twitter and you see like all the old tweets that have somehow accumulated, I just had one day where it was just all your tweets about Allen Robinson.
Thanks.
That was just like you were so upset, rightfully so, about Allen Robinson.
I mean, I had to atone for him last week, right? I mean, I asked and answered. I have fully fallen on the sword about Allen Robinson. For the year, Allen Robinson is wide receiver 76. I mean, like, Richie James has more fantasy points than him. Right? I mean, Chris Godwin has played only 3 games. He has more fantasy points than him. He's got he's averaging under 6 fantasy points a game this season. He's had under 25 yards in 4 out of 5 games, 2 or fewer catches in 3 of 5 games. Yeah, let me put it this way. I'm in a 16-team league. There's no one available in a 16-team league. I'm still dropping Allen Robinson just to.
He's shown you what he is. I mean, he had a good camp, but then he's done nothing since.
Nothing. Wide receiver 76. Like, people are like, I can't drop Allen Robinson.
Yes, you can.
You can drop the 76th best wide receiver in fantasy after 5 weeks. You sure absolutely can. And Robert Woods, I love Bobby Trees, but the truth of the matter is he hasn't had more than 4 catches in any game so far this year. He's been under 40 yards in 4 of the 5 games so far this year. If you can't get it done against my Commanders defense, which is brutal, just makes me question whether you're going to be able to have any kind of consistent fantasy value. The other thing with Woods is that he should be a floor play because the ceiling isn't there. He's not going to have these monster games the way that like Jamar Chase could. But the problem is the floor has kind of fallen out as well.
I mean, they're handing the ball to Derrick Henry about 30 times a game is basically where it's heading in that direction, no matter his yards per carry, and that's going to impact Robert Woods as well.
You just never hear his name in a game.
No,
because he
sad.
is
good player,
not getting the ball, unfortunately for him. All right, well, we have a whole lot more to get to, including quarterbacks and tight ends here on Waiver Wired. Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, Connor Rogers, James B. Don't go anywhere.
Following up on John's question about the Giants, they're up to a faster start. The Eagles, the Cowboys, they've kind of all been rebuilding too the last couple of years, and it seems like they're farther ahead. Why do you think the teams in the division are farther ahead at this point.
Quarterback.
Chose the quarterback here, though, so do you have any regrets about that, or how do you?
No, I got no regrets about their quarterback. I think our quarterback has done some good things. There's been a couple of games that he struggled. But you look at his numbers from yesterday, and you would say, okay, look at his numbers he's had throughout the year. There was a time he was, very solid. And then, we had the unfortunate Philadelphia game, and he struggled a little bit in the Dallas game. But the way he performed yesterday, it just shows you what he's capable of.
I hate this answer. And I'm not even a Carson Wentz fan, but real talk for 1 second here. The Washington Commanders, under Ron Rivera, who's a defensive-minded head coach, is a former defensive player, former defensive coordinator, former linebackers coach, Ron Rivera, who comes from a defensive point of view. They've given up the 3rd most passing touchdowns. They've given up the 8th most yards per attempt. They can't get off the field on 3rd down. Stop somebody. How about that? Maybe not putting Carson Wentz in this situation. By the way, Carson Wentz is one of the most under-pressured quarterbacks, and they can't block anyone and they can't stop anyone. I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz fan, but he ain't the problem. He's been fine. The interception at the end of the game against Tennessee, that was brutal, right? He had 2 bad picks against the Jags, but they won that game, right? Look at this. He's the top 5 in the NFL in passing touchdowns. You're having him throw 42 times a game. That's 3rd in the NFL. He's 6th in the NFL in passing yards per game. By the way, Carson Wentz shouldn't be 3rd in the NFL in pass attempts. That, you know what I mean? Not
a recipe for success.
That's not what you're getting Carson Wentz to do. And so, I'm not even a Carson Wentz fan, but that's such a. I hated that answer. I hated everything about that answer because there's so many flaws with the Commanders team, and honestly, if you were to list every problem that the Commanders have this year, Carson Wentz is in the middle of that pack. He's not the first guy. He's not the second guy. It starts with that defense, that highly paid defense that can't stop anybody.
Yes, but from the point, Ron Rivera says quarterback and then goes on to defend why Carson Wentz has done well and hasn't been the problem. So he just he debated both sides.
Wasn't great delivery.
My interpretation of it is that he's basically saying that the other teams in the division have had more time to build around their quarterbacks, whether it's Daniel Jones or Cooper Rush, who has been in the Cowboys system.
You just said that.
It's still ridiculous.
Right, it's insane. And Jalen Hurts. But again, listen, the Giants were left for dead, and Brian Daboll and his staff are brand new to New York, and they're 4-1, and they've had a lot more injuries than the Commanders have. The Commanders are 1-4, and I would not be shocked if they lose to the Bears on Thursday night. That game's in Chicago, and then they're 1-5. And I'm at this point, they have no more guaranteed money left for Carson Wentz. After this season, start Sam Howell at some point. See what you got there. See what you got in Sam Howell. You have to at some point. I hated that answer. I'm here to defend Carson Wentz.
He said he had no regrets, so that's we'll take from that.
All right, let's quickly.
Seahawks. Geno Smith though. Playing an MVP.
Hang on. Sorry. Sorry, Julie. I'll just.
Wait, I'm driving right now.
No, I know. I'm sorry. It's my bad. But I'm
in the back
really going to
seat.
say no.
I'm there fighting.
I got a whole rant on Carson Wentz, but I just want to say he is available in 54% of the leagues. He is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Even though some of the picks are brutal, the fact of the matter is, as you saw, they are throwing a ton. He is top 6 in the NFL in passing yards and passing attempts. You're not really scared about Chicago as well. 21 more fantasy points in 3 of the 5 games. He is a viable fantasy quarterback as long as he has the job.
Another one, and much more than viable right now, Geno Smith. He is QB6 on the year. He's averaging almost 20 fantasy points per week. Geno is playing really well. Nothing to take away from Geno. He's running more. He's making big-time throws. They can get play action going. The most important thing for sustained success for Geno is that their defense is so bad they are actually allowing him to throw when they want to be a run-heavy team, and Geno has absolutely stepped up in every possible way and more.
So if the defense is bad, it actually helps him out a whole lot more. So, that seems to be the case going forward, especially against the Cardinals. We're going to have tight ends on Waiver Wire when we return, and Mom and Dad won't be fighting because Mom's in charge here on the show.
Wait,
it's Matthew Berry's show, but I guess, yes.
I've been doing the Griddy whenever he does something because he wasn't doing so great early on, and I was telling people to
I don't believe that.
draft him.
I do not believe that at all.
When the player you told your BF to draft has another epic play, so got a Griddy or Irish dance, why are my arms so long?
Here's Gesicki doing the Griddy.
He's like ski jumping.
I don't care.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Oh, Mac.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not a Griddy. All right. Oh, wow. Okay.
Three brutal
all
Griddies.
I
Three brutal
deserve
Griddies
that.
there, Connor.
Griddy.
That is. Zach Wilson had the best one of everybody. Sorry, guys.
It's fantastic.
It's quite difficult on the old
Grade the
knees,
Griddies.
you know?
Yeah, don't mention Zach Wilson. Julie just called herself a mom before the
Oh,
break.
boy.
And
Oh
now
my
all of a
God,
sudden
why
now,
would you say
I'm
that?
just saying, you did. Hey, real quickly, tight ends. If you need a tight end, Taysom Hill, who qualifies at tight end, he played less snaps. You're not going to get the kind of game he did, but he does have 228 rushing yards on the season, plays the Bengals. He's going to face Hayden Hurst, who, by the way, has scored now in back-to-back games, has 7 targets, 3 of 5 games. He's available in 70% of leagues. And then Hunter Henry on this revamped Patriots team is starting to get season high in target share and yards in week 5. For Connor Rogers and Julie Stewart-Binks, I'm Matthew Berry. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. We'll see you tomorrow in the happy hour. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, okay? Respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.